computer. So hi everyone, thank you to be here. So it's a new event in our Craft Luxembourg meetup. It's about remote pair programming. Today we welcome Adrian Bolboaca. Sorry for pronunciation.
No, that's fine. It's great.
Okay, cool.
It's a difficult name, so it's fine.
Thanks for your kindness. He will talk to us about remote pair programming. He has written a book on it, so if you want to buy it, please do it. But if you have, so let's discuss about remote pair programming and I think we have all a lot of questions regarding pair programming because of the period, because of the COVID, obviously. And so what I propose, we discussed about it with Adrian. So if during the session, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask directly to Adrian. So unmute yourself and ask your question. And if you have a lot of questions that pops in your head, you can take your note and keep it for the end of the talk. Okay? So Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this introduction and for inviting me, first of all. It's really a pleasure. I've been so it's a place I've been I was telling you I've been there I think 7 or 8 years ago, and I would like to come back. So typically I would travel around Europe and do these kind of meetings or even pair. Okay. But yeah, today probably we'll talk more, and on the other time we'll pair. So today I want to present you a bit some of my ideas on remote pair programming. And to start off, I want to tell you a bit about myself, and it's interesting maybe to understand where I'm coming from and why I'm doing remote pair programming, why I have done remote pair programming. I liked a lot to always to try new things. So I'm a person who tries to learn things. Even when I was a very little boy, I would try out different stuff. I would I don't know, play with some electronics, and I would destroy them probably, but I would learn something from them. So I would repair radios and so on, or I would do all sorts of technical things. And that's how I am. I try to learn things. I like to learn things. I try to experiment things. So I was maybe with the beginning when I started programming. I don't even remember how many years there are. Probably around 15. When I started programming, I had the chance to be in a team where we, in a way, worked very closely. So we worked. The role wasn't that important, and so we didn't have silos. So we would work together, even if we had a tester or a programmer or someone who was more experienced or so on. So, and also there was this kind of mentorship where you could learn from someone, and we would, yeah, naturally write code together. After a while, I learned that is called remote. That is called pair programming, and I also had the chance of after that to meet a lot of very experienced people in this area of remote of pair programming and working in this way. Also because I started traveling a lot around Europe by doing code retreats. So it was the moment in time when this event called Code Retreat started to pick up, and I was there at the right moment to learn how to facilitate it, and people started inviting me all over Europe to facilitate it. And Code Retreat is an event where you pair for the whole day. So you have six sessions of 45 minutes where you start a problem. You don't want to finish it, but you start it with a certain idea in mind that you want to learn. And at the end of the 45 minutes, you delete the code, which can be difficult or weird. But that means that every day you get to pair with 6 people. And that event was very interesting for me, and I started facilitating. So I wasn't really pairing with people, but I saw what people were doing while pairing. And probably I facilitated some hundreds of code retreats during the years in many countries and many cultures. And I had this opportunity to learn how people work together and how people pair together. And after a while, I started wanting to pair with people that I have met at these events. And because everyone was everywhere in Europe, we couldn't meet all the time. So I would need to pair remotely. And that meant that I started learning how to do that with tooling and everything. And even more, after some time, I wanted to learn how to pair with people I don't know. So I started a thing called Just Pair with Me on my site, on my blog, and people can register there for a time slot just to remote pair. And I had the chance to pair with people I have never met in person, quite a lot of people. And we understood together. We learned, of course, about programming and about tooling and about languages and so on, but also we learned about pair programming. So from this experience or this history, this is where I'm coming from. And so social programming can be great if used well. It's my tagline, because I believe that pair programming is one type of social programming, where we need to work together as a team, and we need to understand each other better. We need to understand how to communicate better. It's a big difference between working solo, working alone, and working as a team or as a pair. So this is a slide with history, some more information. I really liked pairing with other people, with people that have other skills. So it's always interesting for me to, as I, let's say, I've done mostly programming, but I've also done some testing. I've also done some business analysis. I've been also a Scrum Master, a product owner. Now I'm doing, or this year I'm doing mostly agile coaching and digital transformations and so on. I like to pair with people and to learn. So not just pairing in the sense of pair programming, but pairing in the sense of pair facilitation, for example, or pair writing, or pairing when organizing events. I like to do that because I think that two people can have a far better result than just me. I have my blind spots, and someone else could show me those blind spots, and together we'll do a far better job. I also started recording some codecasts with remote pairing. So I started this thing, as I told you, with Pair with Me. And some of the people that were part of that accepted to record some codecasts, but most of them didn't. So there are a lot more sessions that happen without recording. Something else, what I think it's important is to understand that pair programming is not, it can be used for many purposes, and typically you need to understand why you want to do this, especially in a more organized way, in a in a company, let's say in a firm where you want to have more pair programming. I identified at least these three areas. First of all, you want to have more collaborative work. That means that you want to make sure that programmers pair together, and programmers pair with testers, and DevOps pair with programmers, and analysts pair with DevOps, and so on. So you increase the collaboration in a more cross-functional team. That's one reason. A second reason I saw was leveling knowledge. So you want to make sure that people will learn to have at least a minimum amount of knowledge. It can happen. So in my experience as a coach, I saw that it can happen that people have different levels of knowledge even in the same team, but also in the same organization. So it's far better, far more efficiently to start pairing than send people off to a workshop, a training. You have the knowledge inside your organization, so the idea is to try to level it by putting people who know more with people who know less. And advancing knowledge, that's when you want to do things that haven't really been done, or things that are new, things that are very very different than what happened. For that as well, I think pairing is a good option. It's a good choice. So as I told you, I think that pair programming can be of different kinds. So you sometimes hear the this way of driver navigator, the type of the, let's say, classical approach, where the driver is writing the code and the navigator is helping. Typically, this comes from rally driving. So if you like rally, that means that the driver has the wheel of a car, and the navigator knows all the turns and all the dangers and the types of terrain and the slopes and so on. So that's where this metaphor comes from. And because the driver has the wheel and needs to make sure that keeps the car on the uh, on the ground, the navigator needs to say a bit in advance what the driver needs to do. And this is the metaphor that we use sometimes with pair programming, as the driver will focus on the implementation details of what you need to do now, while the navigator is doing the work to look a bit up front, to think about options up front. There's a bit of a difference because the road for a rally is clear, you know it. The conditions in the terrain are clear, but the navigator in a pairing situation is looking at different options. So it's like thinking that there are multiple roads ahead, and some of those roads might get stuck. Some of those roads might be good. So that's the, let's say, the job of a navigator to look at these aspects. Um, it's not a easy role. Probably it's a lot more difficult than the driver, because you need to understand a lot of the options that can happen. So when looking at some code, you need to have in mind variants of its possible evolution in the future. And that means you need to have a lot of experience of evolving code. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do to be a really good navigator. It's the typical approach to write to have to be to write code in a pair, but there are others that I observed also because I've been doing a lot of training and coaching. There's also this trainer and or facilitator and trainee approach where you have the trainer trying to come up with some ideas and teaching the trainee some ideas, some concepts, and this is a bit different or sometimes very different because you can put the trainee as a driver or not, uh, but you as a trainer or facilitator are driving the whole concept ahead and you want to show a certain aspect of programming. So it's more, let's say, focused on a theoretical and practical thing, more than trying to really develop something like a feature as you do in the other types of pair programming. And then of course you can pair with anyone. As I said, you can pair with a tester, with a designer, with DevOps, with analysts, with your CEO, I don't know, with anyone you want. And I do encourage you to pair as much as you can. Um, these are some ideas when I think pairing helps. You can, in a way, they are a detail on how you can make sure that you have a clear goal of pairing. And let's take them one by one. First of all, bettering efficiency. So if you want to have more efficiency in your coding environment, in your production environment, you need to identify those areas where you aren't that great. So I think Kent Beck was saying that you need to look at the type of, for example, I'll give you an example. So you need to look at the types of defects that your team creates, because typically a team will have its blind spots and will create some category of defects. And if you look at those, that category of defects is determined by a certain level, or by a certain lack of skill or knowledge. And in this way, if you really pair on improving that, you will remove the root cause of those defects that are generated. So that's one idea of how you can look at efficiency. Also, you can look at efficiency from the point of view of how fast or how good the solution is, how many iterations you need to look at some code until it's good enough through reviews and so on. So pair programming is a lot better than having code reviews because the code review is instant. And yeah, I know there is that idea that typically managers have saying that why two people should work on the same thing because it's not that efficient. But that's a very narrow way of looking at it, because you need to think also about everything that happens after people start write the code, and all the reviewing, all the bug fixing, and everything like that, that is highly reduced if you have a good pairing session. So that's another way of looking at efficiency. Uh, you can also think of it as trying to make sure that you will work better as a overall as a team in this way. The second point here is about improving technical skills. So maybe you know that you want to improve a certain thing, something very specific, and there you go. It's a very good idea to start pairing. Like, I don't know, you want to improve you don't know Python that well and you'd like to pair with someone who knows, it will be a lot faster than you starting and trying to understand from the documentation. Of course, you will read the documentation as well, but doing it will help you, will boost your knowledge a lot faster. Or if I don't know, you want to learn how to write characterization tests for a legacy system, that's another technical skill. So this is something very focused on, you say, let's pair on this topic, and it's really helpful. At least this is my favorite way of learning, trying to have a focused thing and finding someone who knows better than me. And in this way, I think both of us learn. It's very interesting because you won't have just someone explaining and being bored, because you always have these very interesting conversations or interesting ideas together. Um, Aiding knowledge transfer, typically that is useful for situations when you have juniors, or when you have someone who's like a mentor or trying to teach certain areas of work. It can, of course, be the previous one, the technical skill, but can also be something more generic, like principles of design. So you want to make sure that, let's say, a team will understand how to have a more or less unitary way of creating a solution, and has structuring the code, and reviewing it, and so on. So that's some other way of looking at it. But knowledge transfer is something that you want to focus on, and it's typically from someone who really knows it to someone who doesn't know it that well. And I'm talking about junior, it's not necessarily in programming. Okay, it can be someone, I don't know, who's a junior in some language or in Java, or I don't know. Then you have improving communication. And this might seem weird here, but I think that communication is very important for when programming, and it's very important when working as a team, of course. I often saw that if people know how to communicate well, they will have very good pairing sessions. And in a way, you can use pair programming to improve communication as well. And this is you can do this also in the way of like a trainer and with someone else, or it's even better to try to do with a few pairs and a facilitator, and instead of focusing on how to write better code, focusing on how to communicate better on while writing the code. So like having a coach and looking not at the aspects of coding, but looking at the aspects of how to communicate better. Also, naturally, communication issues appear sometimes. So it's something that you probably see in the first 5 to 10 minutes if one or both of the pairs don't have the necessary communication skills. And it shows in a way what they need to learn, even if they want or not to know that, but it's something very interesting. And quite often pairing sessions go wrong because of this lack of communication skills. The fifth is one, enhancing problem solving capabilities. Typically I have this idea that you need to, when you have a problem, you need to have at least 3 solutions until you say that you can choose one of them. And I have in a way a problem with how school teaches us problem solving, because from mathematics, from informatics, from school, we are told that that's the problem and the solution. So you have the solution for the problem. And quite often in life, it's not like that. You can have several solutions. Many of them can be adequate or good or quite the same, have the same merits, the same quality, but they're different. They can be very different, but they can be quite the same as efficiency, as uh, elegance, and all those qualities. And but also you can have solutions that can be different depending on what you want to optimize. So sometimes and quite often you need to choose and you need to make a compromise because you have either a time pressure or a technical uh, uh, lack of resources or lack of something, or you have some other issues like that, or there's a commercial pressure. So that's why typically you can use pair programming in with this idea of trying to, instead of trying to come up with a solution, trying to come up with a solution with certain focus on something. So to give you an example, you can say, let's have this problem and we will try to have three solutions in the end. One that's extremely optimized for performance, one that is very fast to create, and one that's very cheap to use. And yeah, maybe you can see the very big difference. In a way, I think it helps also for opening your mind to looking at things in different way, um, towards lateral thinking or something like that. And the last thing, when I place where I saw that pairing helps, is by simplifying the existing code base. That means that quite often, yeah, the code can be simpler. And it's interesting that if you have another pair of eyes, before you commit the code or you push the code, you can, someone will say, oh, but this can be simpler, or you don't need that, let's remove that, or look, I'll tell you how you can do this in a better way. And naturally the code becomes simpler if you have this in focus. It's interesting because simple code is difficult to write, and it takes time to write simple code. It's easier to write difficult to understand code or cumbersome code, or code that is difficult to change. But because you have another pair of eyes, it's a lot easier to simplify the code because you have maybe another point of view. So do you have any questions until now, or pause a bit here? And
We have some question on the chat.
yes.
So the first one was from Jack.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most common pairing / roles in business?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to add something, Jack, don't hesitate to unmute. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer Jack, and if you want to have dialogue, just open your mic and let's chat. So I've been working with many organizations, and it depends a bit on the type of organization where you are to answer you that. The typical consultant's answer, it depends. So I'm gonna tell you what it depends on. If you work in a product company, if you have a new shiny product, like, I don't know, let's say Spotify or Booking, or I don't know, something like that, then you'll probably pair with a lot more people, even from marketing sometimes, or from people from business analysis, or so people will want to understand what you are doing. And let's say a technology company like that means that you can pair with almost anyone in there, and it's really useful because it's really helpful to drive the business value out the door really fast. In other types of organizations, like, I don't know, more rigid type of organization, like finance, banking, insurance, I don't know, probably it's more difficult to do that. Okay. It depends a bit on the bank or on the insurance company or so on, and their culture, but you wouldn't pair so much with, maybe more than a business analyst or something like that. If you're extremely lucky, a product owner will pair with you, but that's just maybe 1 in 100, 1 in 50. So yeah, it depends. I gave you maybe 2 extremes to that.
Jack, we have another question from you. Do you want to ask it yourself? I don't know if he's still here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So on the other slide, you had a number of bullets in regards to when is pair programming, where it helps. And so the second one, improving technical skills, you're talking about how when you wanted to ramp someone up, say somebody that doesn't really know that much about Python, would be a great opportunity to pair program. So I'm wondering, like, in that type of situation specifically, would you have the new programmer driving or navigating?
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm doing both. So it's also a question of style, because I have friends that would rather drive in the beginning, and then let's say the newbie would just watch. I prefer the other one, where I would let them drive and I would be the navigator. I guess it depends a bit on your navigator skills as a trainer or technical coach. If you can explain very nice with steps what you need to do, and you can get in a flow, I think it's better that the trainer or the coach would would facilitate. And I'm also giving you a reason for that, coming from psychology, because typically when you write, you remember more than when you watch something. So that's maybe my main reason. It has to do with cognition and how we perceive and remember things. And if we have our if I have my hand on the paper and write myself, or if I have my hand on the keyboard and write myself, it's more probable that I remember what I have done than if someone else wrote and I saw it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jack, for your question. I have just one question from my side. I did go to pair with testers. I admit I haven't done it, and I'm really curious about it.
Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite activities, in fact, because I learned from testers that you need also to know how to destroy your own code. That's the main thing I learned. So programmers have this you're creating something, it's your baby there. It's good. Yeah. So what you created is good because you created it. And then the tester comes and says, no, this is wrong. Look, it'll crash here. This is not good, and so on. So this is what happens typically. So you have two opposite points of view. The opposite of the pair of the programmer, who's the creator, and the view of the tester, who's the destroyer. And you start after a while to learn how a tester thinks and how to destroy that. And after a while, you start incorporating that way of thinking, and you try to think how could a tester or a user destroy this code. And in this way, your code after a while becomes better because you start having that train of thought as well while you write the code.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, so let's go on. There are some pair programming styles that I observed. First of all, it's unplanned pairing. The story that I told you in the beginning when I was a junior programmer and I just was asking my mentor or someone, hey, how can I do that? Can you help me? And someone would drag a chair and we would start working on something. And after 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, we would solve it. That's unplanned pairing. I think almost everybody does that. It's something where we probably say, I was helping someone, I was helping my colleague. And it's good. It's the first thing you want to do. What's a bit weird, maybe, about unplanned pairing is that it happens only in the same specialization. Okay, so it happens only between programmers, between testers, between analysts, between product owners, between DevOps. So I don't know why, but we still have these silos in mind, and it shouldn't happen like that. I mean, we could learn from anyone, but this is how it happens because probably you have the knowledge and it's easier to have this to start this communication. There is what I call traditional pairing, basically driver navigator pairing, where you can have you have two people, I say two programmers, and they have a task, and they take that task and they start working on it. It can be either that the driver would pair for 2 hours and the navigator would navigate for 2 hours, or they can switch every once in a while. If you do test-driven development, you can use this method of which is called ping-pong pair programming, where you have the two roles that keep switching in the following way. You have the driver who writes a test, which is read, but you have the code right, or it's compiling. It's written well, and then you give the keyboard to the navigator. The navigator becomes the driver, and vice versa, and implements that test, writes the next test, and gives the keyboard to the other pair, and so on. So this is why it's ping pong, because you're always giving your pair a test that is read but works well, and the pair needs to implement that the code, the minimum code for that test. That's one way of you looking at traditional pairing. You can also do this switch on time. So you say, let's switch every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes. So everyone gets to pair and navigate, or you can switch when you decide, you say, we have this feature and let's create these classes, or let's create this part, and then we'll switch, and you can decide together. And it's nice because you get to do both driver and navigator sometimes. So yeah, it depends also on the thing you want to do, the skills of the two persons, how fast you want to work. If you are focused more on learning, if you have the time, the luxury to learn, or you really need to make that thing work. So depending on those aspects, you can choose if you switch or not, the driver and the navigator. But basically, that's the traditional pairing aspect. Then there's a style that it's called elastic pairing, which I learned from Ferdinando Santa Croce. If you look on my YouTube, you'll find first time I learned about it during those sessions of remote pair programming that I recorded. So Ferdinando has this approach, which it's extremely interesting, and I learned it from him, which is a lot more flexible, let's say. And as he says, and this is my experience as well, this works really well when you have a team that is made up of people who have the same level of skills, typically senior programmers, or people who really know how to work together, how to communicate together. And it works really well in teams where people have worked together for a while. I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years. So really good structured teams. And elastic pairing is more like, I will pair with you, but if I have an idea, you don't mind if I grab the keyboard and try writing it really fast to show you what I'm thinking, how we should go on from this point. And you always do that. So it's elastic, because if someone has an idea, one of the pairs grabs the keyboard, writes really fast, and says, look, this is what I think we should do. And then the other pair could grab the keyboard, says, no, I think we should do this. And then they decide depending on the options that you have. It's probably one of the most efficient way of pair programming. But again, you need to have people with experience, both in more aspects like communication, general experience in programming, and also some experience with pair programming. And then the fourth style that I know is the strong style pairing, which is vastly used in mob programming or ensemble programming, as some people call it. And basically it comes from Llewellyn Falco, if you know him. So it's a very specific style that he likes to work in, and in a way mob programming has this approach as how it started. What it means is that you have two pairs, but one of the pairs is the strong style. So the driver it's very different than the traditional pairing, where the driver takes the implementation details and writes the code, and the navigator looks beyond, far away. Here with strong style pairing, the driver is nothing more than a smart keyboard that knows how to write the syntax, basically, and knows how to do small things like and the other pair is the strong style. So the navigator is really saying to the driver what to do, and would say something like, create an object of that type, give it the right parameters, inject that thing into the constructor, and so on. So these are things that a strong style would say to a driver. And it can be weird, it can be annoying, but it can be very useful as well. So Llewellyn does this especially because he works a lot with legacy code, and it's easier to do this. So I'll tell you where I think it's really useful. It's easier to have this approach when you have someone really experienced with the technique, like legacy code, like test-driven development, like unit testing. But and that would be the strong style, the navigator. But you don't know exactly the whole ecosystem, or you don't know exactly the language or where to take the libraries from, how to I don't know, how to use the Git repository, and so on. And in this way, it's extremely useful because you have a mix between the driver who really knows how to do all those things, those small things that they won't lose any time, but the navigator knows conceptually and where they need to go with the code. Looks at the code and knows that, I don't know, you need to write a characterization test. You know how the characterization test should look like. You know how it should function. You know all those things. You know what transformations you need to make in order to go there. Or you need to make a refactoring, and you look at the code and you understand it has those parameters that you need to extract. You need to extract the class. You need to extract all those, and the navigator would think how to do that, but to just give small parts, small steps to the driver as what to do. So in a way, the navigator has in their head everything, all the steps, all the possible evolution, but won't write it. Just the driver will write it. It's interesting, but I can tell you that it can be also dangerous. Like it can be annoying for some people. I did meet people who were annoyed about that way of working. It can be kind of rough or tough because you're a programmer. I know how to do that. Why are you telling me these small steps? I'm not a junior. I'm not. Yes, it can be difficult.
I think it also depends a lot on the way you communicate it as a navigator, because if you say, okay, now write private void blah blah blah, take open parentheses, then take this. If you talk like this, like a robot will to the person, it's it creates a lot of frustration, just like you said.
Yeah, exactly. So and there's various styles of strong style. I saw that. So like Llewellyn tends to give more structured instructions, like what I said, refactor, extract those 3 lines into a function. While some other people would say, go to line that, select all the text, push Control R, push F, and so it's more, can be annoying. So I think you need to adapt as a that's my lesson here. You need to adapt as a navigator to the person. So if you have a junior in front of you, or someone who doesn't know the keyboard shortcuts or never done refactoring in an automatic way and so on, you would go to that atomic level of things you need to do. But if you work with someone who knows how to do that, it doesn't make sense. It's annoying and frustrating, and it's also not that effective. So there's a lot of adaptation there to happen. Okay. This is not a communication workshop, but we need to talk about communication methods. It's in a way what we talked a minute ago. I'm a big fan of reading psychology and communication books and so on, and I've been doing that for many years. I think we need to understand how we communicate, and unfortunately, I understand there are many reasons and why organizations tend to be very or to drive people mad. Uh, so they start communicating in a passive aggressive way, typically. What is that? So passive aggressive communication is when you're a bit annoyed, but you don't want to go the full way to say everything you want to the whole extent. So you just start being a bit passive, but then you become a bit aggressive, but then you become passive again, and like you don't care. Also, so that's the thing I saw quite common way of communicating in organizations, and unfortunately, it's a very ineffective way of communicating, and it generates a lot of frustration and generates a lot of problems while pairing, while working as a team, and so on. So if you can read books about this, I'm not an expert or so on anything, but that's what I saw, that there are I learned that there are these three ways of communicating, and the fourth is passive aggressive. Aggressive means that you would use certain words that have are rush, are have this aggressive approach. You'd use a tone. You typically in an aggressive communication where you wouldn't refer to facts, but you refer more to feelings or more to things that are how you feel or how you perceive things. In a submissive way, typically you don't. It's like you don't want to say anything, and it's like you just say whatever, as you say. So it's not a useful way of communicating. It's not going anywhere. And typically, these two, the aggressive and the submissive, are like a good pair, because an aggressive communicator needs a submissive communicator because otherwise it's kind of difficult to be aggressive if you don't have someone submissive. And then there's the assertive approach, where you look more at facts, and you try to talk about facts, about things that are observable, but and you move away from your own perceptions or your own analysis. You just try to stay in the facts. And with all of these, as I said, the tone, right word, and the right words are meaningful. So, of course, we all know what an aggressive tone means. When you're assertive, you should just use a calm tone and express your opinion. Also, words have meanings, and the words that you use can be hurtful, can be aggressive, can be submissive. It's important to try to use the right words in the right context. And I also mentioned here clarity because it's not that easy to be clear and concise, especially. I think this is a skill that we need to learn, to be clear in what we express. And um, I really recommend people to try to train themselves, to try to get feedback on this. So sometimes when I do coaching these days, people ask me if they were clear enough with what they said or what they wrote, and that's important. It's really important when pairing. Sometimes it can happen that pairs wouldn't get along because of how clear they were talking. I saw quite quite sometimes I did see this situation when two people were pairing and they wanted to have the same thing, but they were arguing because they wouldn't get along. It wasn't clear what they communicating one to another, but they want to do the same thing. So yeah, it's important to find persons and ask feedback on how clear is what you are saying, and try to improve yourself. I think it's like something like a lifelong learning process in this way. Now there are these best practices I learned, and some of them are things that I saw myself work, some things I learned from others. So it's a mix. Maybe the first thing and the most important thing in pair programming is taking notes. This is something you wouldn't expect maybe, but especially when you do remote pair programming, it's important to take notes. Why? Because I like at the end of each pairing session to have a short retrospective or a short discussion about what we have done. If we worked for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, or the whole day, it's important at the end to discuss about what we've done, how we saw the pairing session, what we liked, what we learned, what we'd like to improve. And it's kind of difficult to have this conversation at the end after a few hours or at the end of the day if you didn't take some notes with the moments that you considered important or with the lessons that you saw. So that's why I'm taking notes. I'm also taking notes to sometimes not to forget things. So especially when I'm navigating, I can have I can see a lot of ideas or a lot of things around. Like we are doing something, we're refactoring something, for example, but we want to improve other areas as well, and you cannot do everything at once. So in order not to forget that, hey, we need to remember to do that as well, that's when I'm taking notes. And for that, typically I'm using the line number, like I don't know, 54, change function name, or 67, minimize the duplication in that area. Because while looking at the code, you see things, and you don't want to stop the current process, the current refactoring process, or the current coding process. It would be annoying and really not helpful for your driver to stop in that moment. And that's why it's really important to take notes for that aspect as well, especially when you're navigating. And in this way, you help your driver with a longer, well, the bigger picture of the whole thing. Another thing that I saw works really well is starting with small talk. So instead of saying, yes, we have this task, let's start working, um, a bit of small talk helps. So, how are you today? What have you been doing? I've been doing that, and okay, this is how I feel now. I'm tired. I don't know. I'm anxious. I'm really working, looking forward to do this. So it's important because you also understand how your pair is, how your partner is in this moment, and it gives you a certain idea on what you should do or not. Because if you are, let's say, very you need to do something very important, critical coding, and your pair says, I'm very tired, I didn't sleep last night, you should probably not do that. You should probably do something else, or tomorrow or some other day if it's the critical part. But also it helps with understanding where you are, because I don't know, if you need to learn something and you are annoyed on something, maybe you want to discuss that before cool down and then continue with learning, because learning isn't that effective when you have your mind on other things. So small talk is nice. I'm not talking about 45 minutes, but you know, take 5 minutes and chat a bit. Then the next best practice I saw that works is empty your cup. This comes, okay, it's not something that has necessarily to do with pair programming. It's more like a story from Asia that has is, as far as I know, is related with martial arts. And there is this story when the guru, the sensei, says, look, in order to be able to learn all these things, you need to open yourself to knowledge and emptying your cup, because what happens in the story is the sensei would take a cup of tea and would pour tea until it flows over, and says, look, this is how you are now, and in order to be able to have something, to put some more knowledge or try to put something inside, you need to empty your cup. This story is also used in the apprenticeship patterns book, if you have read it. So it was used in software programming before, and I really like it, because if you want to learn something, you need to have your mind open. You need to make sure that maybe you need to unlearn some things. So that's one way of looking at how to empty your cup. So maybe not everything you know is the best, and you find better ways, and that's the idea. Debrief, the fourth best practice. I mentioned it a bit when I said about taking notes. Debriefing is important because it shows you as a pair how you worked together, and as you can be extremely good at pairing, at navigating. You can be very good as a trainer or coach, but still you won't ever get that right approach with everyone. So quite often you would see in these debriefings that your pair would say, I would have wanted to discuss more the solution before starting, or we discussed too much design up front and I wanted to pair more, or I think that quite often what you explained wasn't clear and I'd like more explanation. or it was good how things happened with, I don't know, that syntax that we learned together how to use. So all these things are useful, are important to learn, and in this way the pairs can adapt to each other. Yeah, and we're all different. Some people would like to have more design on or draw on paper what you want to do. Some others would prefer to write code immediately. And in this way, I think we need to adapt one to another, or at least reach a common ground where we understand that I need a bit more design up front, I need a bit less, but in this way we can work better together, and we feel that we create progress together. So debriefing is very important, and also reminds you of what you learned during the session, what you liked, and I think it never happened to me that I had a debrief without saying, "Look, I learned this from you," and that's really powerful. At the end of the session, you really have you are reminded, or because it's the last thing you do during the session, it's just the thing that you remember, and you do remember what you have learned because you have talked about it. Otherwise, it would be difficult to say what you learned, or what you liked, or what you'd like to improve. So it is probably one of the most important things I do with pair programming. And it's the same with remote, so we do the same. We take notes, both of us, and at the end we discuss about what what went good, what we'd like to change for the next session, what we learned, and so on. The fifth is best practice.
Excuse me,
want
Adrian. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll need to break in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you will need to rush a little bit, but yeah, sorry for that. It's really interesting. But,
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
So we need to break to stop, you mean?
Yeah. I will have to.
Okay.
I will have to leave. Yeah. Otherwise, I cannot go home. So.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Then you have, so this dialogue courtesy is the fact that you want to have the people around you, like I'm annoyed when people start talking on top of me. Some aren't, so it depends. But this means that you have this this courtesy of understanding when you speak, not to speak too long, and so on. This is important to what you want to do with the person near you, and it really brings a lot of benefits. Building confidence means committing often, for me at least, and good unit tests. Committing often creates confidence that you're going to the right direction, and writing good unit tests, it help a lot with the same thing, with confidence that you're going the right direction. So it's important. If you can do that, I highly recommend. So I commit often on a local repository, Git repository, and I have unit tests on, well, when I can. And the last one is trust your pair. So this might seem redundant, but it's not, because what you need to do is understand that sometimes your pair might do weird things, but do let that thing open. Like, try to see, okay, it does something weird. I don't know exactly what it's doing, but yeah, I'm here. I'm trusting you. Just show me what you want to do, and I'll trust you for for a while, and then we can discuss about your idea. Because the other approach is to say, no, this is wrong. Don't do that. even before you know what's going on, and it's not really helpful. It's not helpful at all. Okay, I'll skip this a bit with setup. I want to tell you about two aspects of remote pair programming. So you can have screen sharing and remote pairing tools. That's the easy thing to have, like screen sharing tools, like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, and so on. But they're cumbersome to use because they use a lot of, you have a lag and they use a lot of resources and so on. And then there are these specialized pairing tools that are better, but they're not perfect. So like Tuple, Visual Studio Code, Use Together, CodeShare. Also Pop is a new one that's trying to do this. So I would prefer the latter, but you do have certain restrictions, especially if you work in an organization where you have security constraints and so on. So yeah, if you can implement such a tool, I highly recommend it. If not, yeah, use the other ones. Yeah, and that was all I had for today.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you as well. If you have any questions, or if we need to stop, just tell me and we'll stop.
Yeah, sure. Do you have any question, guys and girls, folks? No?
Yeah, I have one. So you talked about those different styles. Would you say, or do you decide upfront before your session to stick to one specific style, or you start with one style and then choose whatever's appropriate during the session?
Yeah, so you cannot use elastic pairing if you don't have a level of you don't have a seniority. So I would if you have a junior, you'd say okay, you cannot do that. With traditional and strong style, I think this is what you need to decide a bit upfront, because the strong style pairing can be annoying. And you should ask your partner, is it okay if we try strong style? Because, it can be rough for some people. So yeah, I kind of decide upfront that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And regarding the timing, Adrian, what do you recommend for a pairing session? I know people that say, okay, you need to do it during the whole day, otherwise it won't be efficient. But for me, it's crazy. You cannot do it during the whole
crazy.
day.
Yeah, it's too much. So it depends a bit on your how used you are with pairing and the seniority level as well. But I wouldn't ever recommend to have a session per se longer than 90 minutes. You can have more sessions like this in a day, but not more than 90 minutes. Have a break after that.
Yeah.
Go have a coffee, walk around. I don't know. If you want to have another one, that's fine. But typically that would be my recommendation. Try 90 minutes per day, and if you can more, experiment. But 90 minutes would be really good.
Okay. Yeah, usually I do session of 1 hour.
Yeah.
Maybe several during the day with several people, but yeah, 1 hour is really good, I think. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. 1 hour is really good. 90 minutes is maximum.
Yeah. Okay.
And it also has a reason. Going back to psychology, it has a reason, because your energy goes down after 60 minutes to 90 minutes. It really plunges. So you should stop. So 60 minutes is probably where you still have a lot of energy, and towards 90, you have less and less energy and focus.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello, I have a small question.
Yes.
It's kind of related to the same last question. Like, for example, we quit after 90 minutes to get refresh ourselves, and then should we can we try to do the coding ourselves separately, individually, and continue the work, or it's always good to continue the work as with a pair? That's my question.
Pairing, so you need to decide. We didn't talk about this. It's a very good question. Thank you. You need to decide a bit when to pair, because pairing is not efficient. It's not always more efficient than working alone. So if you, I don't know, if you need to do some settings on your IDE, I don't think you need to do pairing. Or if you need to parameterize, write a XML document and something like that, parameterize some test data, I don't think you need necessarily pairing, only if it's very complex. So I think you need to choose your tasks or parts of the task when pairing is important, helps you, and parts of it when the navigator would say, yeah, whatever, yeah, I don't have anything to help you with, because yeah, you can do this by your own. So that's how I look at it. And of course you can work alone after that for a while. And this is how I would say it's a good idea to partition your work on when pairing is useful, when it helps you, when it doesn't. And I was doing also some other things, like we would still pair, okay? We'll still be in a remote pairing session, but both of us would do in parallel 2 of these simple tasks where we wouldn't need to work together. So like, okay, you search that into the documentation, how we do that, and I will search the other thing, how we do that, and in 5 or 10 minutes we'll go back together and continue the coding. So that's also something you can do. So stay in a remote session, still discuss, and then go towards pairing again.
Okay, thank you. Still, like again on the same topic, for me, what's not clear is like when we choose pair programming to have, let's say, a way of working or a culture in the environment where we're working. After taking the decision, is it like whatever code we are producing day to day, it should be done only by the pair programming? Like you said, I agree, for small things we can do individually, but like should always pair programming should be there? I mean, less pair programming or how much amount the pair programming can be done, because sometimes I see it's a possibility that to have a culture, like implement everything as pair programming only. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So I'm also having a risk-based approach sometimes. If you have a risk of introducing defects, it's a good idea to use pair programming. It's a way of optimizing time, okay? If you have a relaxed organization, I think pairing always would be great. But sometimes people would say, yeah, we're pressured, we need to do this and that. So then you kind of try to optimize and looking which are the tasks where we could generate more defects or where we need to pair for that. So that's maybe a way to optimize it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So if there is no more question, I think we can break here. Maybe a last one.
There's one from Florian, I see. Wouldn't you consider that mutual benefit and mutual trust is an implicit requirement of efficient pairing? Yeah, I think so, but we need to acknowledge that not everybody is considering that, and we need to say it up loud that you need to trust your pair and you need to work in a decent manner with your pair. Unfortunately, there are quite a lot of programmers I have worked with who consider that they don't have anything to learn. So when pairing with such a person, you won't see either trust or mutual benefit. You'd see more like arrogance. That's the truth.
Hopefully there are not that much.
Yeah, it can be. So I did have quite a few pairs like that, especially in some organizations, and there was no mutual benefit or mutual trust there.
Yeah.
You can, as a coach, you can bring them around, and I use pairing for that, but yeah, it's a struggle. It's like more like therapy than pairing.
Okay. I think we can break here. So, and yeah, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting. I keep
Thank you as well.
one really great thing, and I will propose to my colleague tomorrow. So bear with me. We definitely will propose it. I think tomorrow at one of my clients. Yeah, it's a really
So
good.
how I have it is I have a tool. I think it's called Calendly, or a tool like that where you can put a time slot where people can basically register in that time slot. So you choose the time slot when you want to pair with people. That time is occupied in your calendar, and someone can register, can subscribe to that time slot. So I think that's a nice way to have easy. So not to make it bureaucratic and
Yeah, that's really cool.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Adrian. And if you want to know more, don't hesitate to ask him directly on Twitter. You are pretty much there, pretty much there. And if you want to know more, don't hesitate to buy your book as well. And I think it's available on Amazon, on a lot of suppliers. So don't hesitate.
Amazon Unpacked. Yes.
Yeah. Amazon Unpacked. Yeah. So thank you all. See you next time. Next time we'll make a session with Drag. I don't want to to misspell his name, but it will be on code reviews, on how async code reviews kill your, let's say, your productivity or your efficiency. So it will be a great talk as well. So thank you again. Thank you all. Bye, and see you next time. Thank you again, Adrian.
Bye.
Bye.